Councillor McDonnell, who unfortunately has had to attend a funeral out of town today. Hopefully he will be back in not too distant future. So would somebody like to move those apologies be sustained, please? Moved Councillor McPhail, seconded Councillor Phillips. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So also just want to take a minute to introduce a new face on the screen today, Carla Brotherson. Carla has just started working for the council in a corporate support role, and will have a bit to do with council as time goes on. So she's come on today just to see who you are, and just to get to know a little bit more about the processes that we use in local government, which for some people can be a little bit ponderous, I'd have to say, but I'm sure that Carla, you will enjoy it and look forward to working with you into the future. Righto, let's kick off this afternoon by item 2, solid waste bylaw, and this is a piece of legislation that we need to be progressing quickly, and we have Keith with us today, although you may not recognise Keith under all that here, but welcome along, Keith, and I just want to get you to perhaps introduce this and talk us through the particular item.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is one of the more straightforward reports that I've done in recent times, and is really a relatively simple matter in terms of the current waste bylaw that we have in place was due for review in 2018, and it automatically gets revoked if it's not replaced by a new bylaw by the 1st of July this year. So the purpose of my report is really just to set out the background to it, that it's been agreed that there will be a joint bylaw prepared between the Southland councils, and a waste advisory group was set up to do that, and work started on the bylaw and went into abeyance a little bit at the beginning of last year, but started off again towards the end of last year and was progressing quite well. And then the COVID-19 came along and staff resources were directed elsewhere. So in terms of the process that we've got before us, the path of least resistance is to reaffirm the 2008 bylaw as a temporary measure until such time as the new joint bylaw is drafted, put out for consultation and adopted by the 3 councils. It is a 3-step process that council needs to go through. First, council needs to be satisfied that the bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the issues that we have with waste. And really that is from an administrative and a regulatory point of view. And secondly, that the draft bylaw as circulated with some minor changes in it from previous is also appropriate. And council needs to resolve to undertake a fairly short consultation process, which in this case, being short, is quite appropriate because really the status quo is continuing. I'm happy to respond to any questions people may have.
Well, thank you, Keith. I think it's you've explained it very well. Just before I open it for discussion, Mr. Chief Executive Steve, do you want to make any comment to this item? You're on mute, Steve.
Yes, Your Worship. Look, just really reinforce what Keith has said. The main event really is the WasteNet inspired reviewed bylaw, which is not far away, but to ensure that we have a full kit of regulatory levers available to us throughout the next few months, and particularly given that we are now moving into a new regime for curbside recycling. At least it's imperative that we have an effective bylaw in place, and this particular initiative ensures that we will have that, but it may only have a shelf life of several months before a far more expansive and reviewed bylaw comes forth from WasteNet.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. Okay, so councillors, we have the item before us. We have a recommendation which is made up of 3 parts. We also have a copy of the proposed bylaw attached to the item. To me, it looks like it's fairly straightforward, and we just need to progress this as quickly as we possibly can. But it's open for discussion or proposal and or amendment. So, is there any questions that councillors have of these? John?
Just there's a wee spelling mistake on page 13, 14.4. Just talking about shifting vehicles. It's got more such vehicles as directed by the council. I think it's move such councils. It's just a spelling error.
Great, thank you.
Your Worship, I think it's appropriate that we move or extend the present bylaw, albeit now a draft bylaw, until WasteNet produces a new updated regional bylaw. This is the most sensible way forward, and I'd be happy to move the recommendation.
Okay, you're moving the 3 recommendations?
I'll move the 3 recommendations.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Grant, Doug? Okay, so it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that proposed action? There's not. I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Right, we're on now to item 3, which is the council budget, and we have a whole set of very unusual situations facing us as a council, but also as a community and as a nation. And I'm sure that everyone is very aware of those challenges and the challenges that are unfolding on a daily basis. But before you have a memo from the Chief Executive proposing a budget for council for the next 12 months, beginning the 1st of July, and that is up for discussion this afternoon. But before I open that up for discussion, I would ask the Chief Executive just to make any comments that he would like to in terms of getting to the point that we are at today, and any points of guidance that you would like to give to council now.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, the budget preparation process really had 2 phases. I guess you could say it was the pre-floods and COVID-19, where we thought we were looking at a reasonably high rate increase, like a lot of councils in New Zealand, trying to responsibly and both in regard to financial obligations, but also in terms of the work program and obligations we've already entered into, to continue forward with those. And then with the floods, but then COVID-19 and the fast-paced changes to the economic climate, it really behove the staff and obviously the councillors as well, when we've had, I think, 3 workshops on estimates, and we've been paring our way over the last 2 months or so, trying to drill down to the lowest possible amount, but at the same time make it sustainable, and at the same time also acknowledge there's been requests in the community that have come to the council for consideration. Also having a mind's eye to the capacity review that the council undertook about 18 months ago, which spawned some specific recommendations that the council endorsed again about nearly 18 months ago now, and they in part have found their way through the process. And in a typical perfect storm, there are some commitments again the council had agreed to, so Great South and the transition to fully funding the council's share of the Great South contribution, both for core and contract funding, have found their way now into the forthcoming financial year. Insurance premiums have increased, by making that a given. And there are also some IT expenditures which are a result of audit and risk overview of that particular area and a need for greater investment. So we come to you today, Your Worship, with we thought was a 2.64% rate increase, and then a late breaking development, as you alluded to, which seems to occur on a daily basis, with the MLT saying it can't go any further with the reasonably long-standing arrangement. That's the trust fund 25% of basically the ratepayer requirement for the MLT event centre. That's the portion that cannot be recovered from fees and charges. So that's put rates up about 0.21%. I have in my report alluded to there are potentially further gains that can be made, but they do come at a cost. Cost of either organisational capacity or political or community desires. And only elected members can weigh those up. But I refer specifically to the Community Strategy Manager position, the Tussock Country Festival Coordinator, that position provided for, which is part-time, but it's provided for 6 months of the year. And I've also referred to defer or delaying the replacement of the General Manager for Regulatory and Community Services position. All those areas, if they were all embraced, would probably add up to close to 1.5% there or thereabouts, but they would come at a pretty hefty. How hefty that is really is for elected members to weigh up, but I guess we've got to a point now, Your Worship, both in terms of the marching timeline to have the annual plan presented and adopted for the council by the end of June, and making these judgments, which we cannot make as staff. We need the council now to come in and give us some direction about what's in and what's out, and what might be acceptable from an overall financial perspective, both in the eyes of elected members as governors of the organisation, and the public that we serve in terms of the range of services they expect, but also the fiscally responsible result they absolutely demand.
Thank you, Steve. And it's unfortunate, but you seem to be frozen in time on the screen. And while we can hear you okay, we can't see. We can see an image of you, but it's not a live image. So maybe you need to refresh your screen, but we can certainly hear what you're saying. So thank you for that, and welcome along, Stuart. It's good to have you back on board. So we're just on item 3, which is the beginning the council budget. So I think councillors, we've had a lot of toing and froing on this, and you read in the narrative from the chief executive, we really begun this this conversation around what the budget will look like, sitting at a 6.7% increase, which is pretty scary, and one that certainly wasn't going to be a goer from any way, shape or form, or in any way, shape or form for this council. I believe that we have worked through the challenges and looked at some of the opportunities that we have, and have got to a pretty responsible place for the council to move forward, so that it's in a position to not just fulfil its obligations from a legal perspective, but also to be active and capable of making changes and encouraging innovation in our community. I think that where we're at now is a good spot, and while there could be further cuts if council's of a mind, I think that if we do go through that process, then we'll lose quite a bit of capability for the council and the community to recover in the long term, or both in the short term and in the long term, actually, because the areas where there are opportunities, I believe, are ones that are ones that would react and would prove invaluable to the challenge that COVID has inflicted upon us. But this is open for discussion and or amendment. So I'll turn that over to council now and welcome any comment that any councillors might have. So who's going to be first? Councillor Hosted, then Councillor Gardine.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I guess when looking at this, I'm a little bit torn. It'd be nice to be delivering a 0% rate increase to the community, but also the council is probably in a privileged position where it can provide employment opportunities in the community that's losing so many. Also, yeah, probably echo your comments. A 0% rate increase this year is going to be a significant rate increase in the 2021 budget. When we get around the table in a year's time, off a 0% increase, we're in for probably quite a wake-up call. So we do need to have something modest, and I think that's what we have before us. I've got a couple of minor questions, but could I just ask them of the Chief Executive? The base wage increase in there, Steve, of 286,000. I guess that's comparing to LTP as opposed to our current financial reality, a budget that was set 2-3 years ago, as opposed to what our current cost structure is in place. Is that showing a wage increase to the staff, or is that just showing what we're currently incurring?
Okay.
It's showing.
Well, carry on, Steve.
Sorry, that's showing what we're currently incurring, not a desired growth in salary.
Okay. Am I stilted, Tracy, or is it just Steve?
No, it's just Steve, I think. Yeah.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
Just a couple of other ones. The corporate HR position and the animal control part-time position, again, are positions I would perhaps question, but again, I think the risk is bring that percentage increase down too low. I prefer to leave it in the Chief Executive's hands to manage. You know, the next 12 months are going to be interesting and evolve, so I'm pretty comfortable with where it is. In terms of the management accountant, the Tussock Country position and community strategy position, I guess this is the year that the council should be supporting those positions, in my view, so I'm supportive of those. Just lastly, on page 22, is that a typo from Mr. Patterson? We've got our corporate organisation, the Mataura Licensing Trust, writing to the council saying they had a shit. 2020 has been shit for Gore. Has he been the victim of spell checker, or does he actually mean that?
I don't know. That's the letter that arrived. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Pretty shocked if that's the way our corporates communicate to council. I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Brett. Now, look, you raised some good points, and we've got John and then Bronwyn.
I just had the same question about the various base wage increases, whether that was on for this year, and that has been answered. But most corporates are seeing their staff voluntary taking 20 to 25% reductions for 6 months across the board to see what happens. We need to be aware of that because that's happening in our own community. Depends how we pan out of this in the next 6 months. Next year's budget may need to have some harder scruple or looks at it before we pass that. But I do have a question about the animal part-time animal person too, whether we should delay that till we actually see the income come in from dog registrations, the extra 25,000, and when that is actual, we could employ the person. That's another query I would put on.
Okay.
Otherwise, yes, we do need to still keep an increase in our budget. Otherwise, it's going to be a big hurt next year. I think there's going to be a flow-on effect into next year's increases.
Yeah,
So we
no,
need-
I agree with you there, John. And just on the dog control one, and I'm not sure if you're with us at the moment, Steve, or not, but if perhaps you can just speak a little bit to why that needs to happen this year.
Desirable. It comes out of the dog action plan, and to be honest, that's been a position that's hard to fill. That's actually to be funded by a proposed dog control fee rearrangement that council is proceeding with. But it can easily be backed out. It's more aspirational. It's not essential.
But I think we've got a bit of a challenge here, and it's quite critical that we have the chief executive in a position where we can answer these questions and we can understand what he's saying. I think we might just tie-ho for a few minutes and see if we can sort out the technical difficulties that Steve is having, and then we'll recommence the meeting as soon as possible. So, Sonia, do we need to do something there with the recording to stop this at the moment? If not, we'll just leave it sitting, and just remind councillors that while we are not in a meeting, in a formal meeting, this is being recorded, and as I understand it, will be live. So just remind you of that. Excuse me while I go and see what I can do here. Okay, councillors, we should see the chief executive appear very soon, but he might have the wrong name. It could well be called Sonia Gherkin for the sake of this meeting. It appears there's been a problem with his tablet, which is always a bit of a risk, I guess. Just give him.
Which one here? Yep, fine. Yep, cool.
Okay. Right. We're back on board.
Yep.
Okay, so where we left you, Steve, I was just asking if you were able to give us a bit of a heads up on where things are at with the dog control proposal and why it's important to have that position filled this year.
It's not critically important. It's desirable to appoint that part-time officer. It is a result of the dog action plan that was established about 2 years ago. To be fair, it's a position that's been proved to be hard to fill, but would it seriously undermine our ability to deliver an effective dog control service? No. It is, I say, only aspirational, so it can come out of the budget. But it was the intention. My understanding with that position was going to be covered more by fees than rates. But in terms of principle and being seen to be doing the right things, I think it could easily be parked to one side.
So in terms of timing, that could be a good idea to exclude this time around. It's not going to compromise the operation of the control service, is it?
No, not at all, because the emphasis is on education and advice, not on delivering the essential service of dog control in the district.
Okay, I think, councillors, I'm getting a sense that there's no real imperative to have that talked about or to include it in this year's plan. Is there any objection to that, to just remove that for this 12-month period? It appears so. Okay, so if we can move on to other items, and Bronwyn, you wanted to raise something? Oh, you're on mute, Bronwyn.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. Just want to say thanks to Steve and Donna for the good work that they've done. I know they've been beavering away at it for quite some time, and it's looking really good. And I mean, I'm in complete agreement that I know nobody likes paying their rates, and we all moan about it. But at the end of the day, we've got services to provide and people to employ. So better a small increase now than a bigger one down the track. But I did have a query of Steve about the MLT, if that was possible, please, and another comment.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, I was just wondering the amount that the MLT have got listed in their letter of 17,423. Is that an annual payment or a quarterly one?
Through Your Worship, it's a quarterly one. However, that quarter was extraordinarily high because it included some maintenance in the event centre. So it wouldn't normally be that high. What we budget for is around $33,000 per year from the MLT for the projected 25% of ratepayer input required to run the centre.
Oh, thank you. And my other comment was about the community strategy person and also the Tussock country. I think we need those, the expertise from those people to sort of lead the way forward, given that we want to attract visitors and permanent residents, and also the fact that the Tussock country position at this part is a 6-month contract, and I'm sure that could be reviewed if we felt that it was an unnecessary cost. So I'm all in agreement with that.
Thank you, Councillor Bolger. Cliff, you had some comments?
Yes, look, I think to go from 6.71 to what will now be below 2.84 is an extraordinary result. I see the Chief Executive and staff have looked at a lot of areas and refined and give them particular scrutiny. I am conscious that the overall influence for much of our spending is a requirement from central government to maintain roads, water and wastewater and upgrade them. So to be doing that at the same time and deliver a conservative rate increase is a good result. I do see that we've got the benefit of reduction in interest rates of 470k, and that's been a big contribution. I do think, and we've got a history of conservative financial management here in Gore, and this is an example of that. So I'm very, very comfortable with 2.84 or what will be slightly below that, and being able to maintain our services and upgrading of infrastructure is quite extraordinary. So I'm very comfortable.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. Councillor Davis, Nikki, you had some comments?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't able to be at the last rates workshop, so I'm unsure about what you would have discussed and what was covered. So I've got a couple of queries. So our events coordinator at the moment won't be having too many events happening. There's positions such as that in council. Is it possible that she could do some of the Tussock Country coordinating role?
Look, yes. Unfortunately, the events coordinator is recuperating from a spell in hospital and will be off for some time. In terms of Tussock Country, look, she could well be coordinated, could be connected to that. However, and before she left for an operation, she was very connected and very valuable in business recovery plan that we were putting together. So I think that there's a real role for that person in the foreseeable future, and certainly in the next 6 months anyway, until we see exactly where we are with events, for her to be very active in that space.
So tell me exactly then what the Tussock Country coordinator will do and how they'll do it and when they'll do it.
Okay, so who wants to speak to that? Bronwyn, do you want to talk to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nikki, I think the biggest thing that we've noticed is that the festival has to be taken from a very able base of volunteers. Going forward, it needs to be someone with a professional background and connections in advertising, media, social media, all sorts of things that we probably, no disrespect to our events coordinators, but they just don't have that expertise. And working with the current person who's been engaged to help has been quite an eye-opener for all of us on that committee. And I really think if we don't have someone that's professional and able to do that, it's going to fall flat in its face, and we don't want that to happen.
It's been interesting working along with that group just to see how it's going to pan out. And I have to say that when I first started meeting with them, I thought this is just a matter of coordinating what's already there, and it's not going to be too big a job. The more you get into it, the more potential there is for something very special for this part of the world. And I think the risk of not doing it well is huge. And that's, in my mind, why we need to have the right person at the right time to coordinate this. And I think that what's happened over the last 6 months in preparation for this year, which unfortunately had to be cancelled, we have witnessed a really good professional doing a really good job. To the point that the bookings and the intent expressions of interest in this year's festival were huge. And I just happened to hear today that the bookings, the accommodation bookings for next year are very heavy already. In fact, I think there might be a lot of places that are already booked out with the anticipation of what is going to happen at Tussock Country next year.
So is there a smaller role for them to play for this financial year, or do you fully intend them to have the entire part-time role?
So yeah, I would think that it's a 6-month role, and it's funded along those lines at this stage. Okay, other questions, queries? You had another question, Nikki, did you?
Yeah, it was about the community strategy manager. So what role would they play?
Do you want to talk about that one, Steve?
Sure. At the moment, we have a community strategy committee that really needs, in effect, a principal advisor. There is no resource in this area, so the whole attention around business recovery, some work that we've been doing as best as we're able in the last few weeks with the local business sector, that would be championed by a community strategy manager. Some of the issues that social issues that may emerge and were evident prior to the COVID-19 occurrence in terms of community resilience and drugs in the community, that type of stuff. This is an area where a community strategy manager would work. So they're the type of things that, and the whole economic development approach where the council really hasn't had, in the departure of the 2 mural contractors, no longer has a presence. The community strategy manager is deemed or considered to be a void that can be filled. And work with the chairman of the community strategy committee to come up with some initiatives, because currently what happens is when these things do occur, we can sprint for a while, but all other people have other jobs to do and then revert back to their full-time role, and the focus is lost, and then the issue never really gets championed. So that's the purpose behind the community strategy position.
So just a bit further on that one, Richard, do you want to make any comment as chair of that particular committee?
Yeah, I just had a few general comments. I was actually going to lead into that anyway, regarding support for what we're looking at the moment. Obviously, the landscape's changed as we've come through. We're obviously sitting on that on our rate as it is at the moment, and I think it is credit to Steve and the crew there that we've managed to get into that position, although next year is going to be a different story. But we don't know. Everything seems to be changing so fast within our local community environment. Within support around the community strategy manager, just in some of the commentary I've had through the workshops in the last month with business members, people amongst the community, even up to today, talking to members of the business community. There's a great deal of fear of the unknown and what's actually happening. We are seeing businesses restructuring and going. I would see that this role would be key and important to looking at those community opportunities for businesses and the greater community, also looking at those funding streams. And probably one of the big things that have come out of those workshops was trying to retain our capability and capacity in our town, or else we're going to lose things. And I think once they're gone, they're gone. And we know that those mural positions we had through the Gore development groups or the community development, they provided a huge amount of paperwork and a huge amount of legwork and groundwork for projects which we have actually brought back to the table to put before central government when we're looking at these turn and shovel projects that we're trying to get through. So that we have projects that we're just going to shelve if we don't have that input. Also, we're probably going to have a business community that it just needs that support. And I know that sometimes people look at these positions as luxuries, but they're not a luxury. I believe and stand by it. It's essential. We need someone there in the community. The best thing we can get on through council is to get something on the ground at the moment and stay strong and hopefully keep ourselves together. Just a closing comment in regard to obviously Tussock Country and that we don't know what's ahead for us. We're seeing the groups of people slowly increasing in size, and we are looking at a domestic tourism situation that's probably developing that's reasonably unknown yet, and we may be onto something that will become bigger than we actually understand. We may be working in an environment that's leading into a tourist sort of destination, and it will need professional management and knowledge to achieve that. I don't think it's a part-time fly-by-night position. Just regarding MLT too, the commentary with the letter that's been tabled by our CEO, I'm just hoping that as their books go through into the next financial year, they'll open them up and maybe there may be something there, because I think there has been a bit of business around town, and I appreciate what their CEO said, but I hope they're not closing the book in regard to the MLT Event Centre. I hope that if there is some money that comes online, they might reconsider in later quarters.
Thank you, Richard. And just in terms of that latter comment around the MLT, look, you know, we've had a long history of working collaboratively with the MLT, and we will continue to do that in every way, shape or form that we can. I appreciate the challenge that they have, and I'm looking forward to meeting with both the Chief Executive and the President in the not too distant future, just to talk about how we can build on the relationship that we already have. Okay, so we'll move on then to Neville. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just in regards to the community strategy management position, I made my feelings earlier on in the piece about this position. I just hope that that it's going to be value for money in today's climate and what's happening out there with the conversations I've had with a few of our local ratepayers. Us employing that position, I don't think there's a few people very happy. So I will wait with interest about what that role brings to our community, and hopefully it's a good one. Apart from the rest of the budget, I think it's, thank you very much, Steve, you've done a good job.
Thank you, Neville. And look, I take on board the concerns on the fears that you are expressing. And I think that as a council, if we've made a decision to invest in our community, then I believe that we've got a responsibility to do that in the best way we possibly can, where we think that there will be a genuine payback, not just in financial terms, but in financial terms, but also in community capacity building for the future. And I think this is an ideal opportunity for that. And while, yes, there's some dollars involved here, I think that the payback will be tenfold over a period of time. And I've got absolutely no doubt that Tussock Country will develop into something that is an icon for not just this district, but a national icon. It's got some unique features and some real potential that I think will be built on. So it's certainly my views around that. I endorse the comments that have been made about the work that's done to get us from 6.7 to 2.84. I think there's been a lot of sweat and toil gone into getting to that point, and I know that there are quite a number of things that both council staff and councillors were hoping for to be included, but now it's just not the right time. And in my view, what we have before us is a responsible and a fair budget, and hopefully one that we can continue the progress that we have made over recent years. It's interesting that we're in such a tight financial time frame, yet the projects that we have on the go are some of the biggest that this council has ever seen, and some of the most necessary that this community has ever seen and witnessed. And look, I just hope that we can get through all of those without too much pain and suffering, and also that there will be support from government come along. I'm very hopeful that that will happen, and hopefully this week might see some progress on that one. Okay, other comments or questions around the budget? Councillor Dixon, sorry, did you have your hand up? Glenys?
Yes, Your Worship, none of us like or want to rate rise, especially at this time when all ratepayers are feeling a pinch. But the central government legislation, which requires compliance of local bodies and the council's committed costs. And we also know that borrowing puts the burden on future generations. So I feel a small but necessary rates rise of 2.84 is fiscally responsible. And I congratulate those that worked hard to bring that down 2.84. I have a question just regarding the MLT agreement, and I'm wondering if it was a binding agreement or was it just like a gentleman's handshake. I'm just wondering about that, how they can just say, well, we're not going to pay this now.
Would like to think that a binding agreement or a gentleman's handshake are the same thing. But
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if it was, but.
Steve, you want to make a comment there?
Yes, I think from memory, it was an email exchange between myself and the former general manager, which reflected a fairly close relationship between two public bodies. So there's no agreement that we can hold MLT to task to. It was an email exchange, and to be fair, it has been in existence for around about 9 years and has operated without any difficulty in that time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillors, who else wants to speak? I see we've got 3 hands up, but I think they may be from the past. Nikki, yeah, Nikki, did you want to, oh, Nikki? Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I think the 2.84% increase is, as Glenn has said, fiscally responsible. And thank you for taking the time to explain a bit more about what the Tussock Country and the Community Strategy Manager would actually do. I hope that we can see some progress in the coming months for those positions, and I really hope that we'll see some true benefit for the community. So thanks to Steve and the staff for delivering a good budget, and I guess we'll just have to try and keep that budget and the budgets that the council staff have. You need to keep a close eye on those, because things aren't going to improve for the next 12 months, I don't think. So thank you.
And thank you, Nikki. And can I say that the hopes that you've expressed are exactly the same hopes that I have, and I'll be doing everything I possibly can to make sure that any money that we're spending is seen to be value for money, and there is going to be good return from that. Doug, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. There's not a lot I can add. Everyone has said everything that needs to be said. We are in a seriously, the business sector, retail sector in Gore is in a very, very dicey position at the moment, as we all know by the headlines in the Southern Times this morning. And there'll be loss of jobs, well, predicted losses of jobs in that sector. But this is a very, I think it's a good budget. I can see the point of having the community officer, the community strategy manager. We have had a lot of stuff across the line as far as shovel-ready projects, or before that, the Provincial Growth Fund, generally through the 2 employees that were employed by the Mayor's office, and they're now gone. So we do, yeah, I do back that, and take my hat off to Steve and Donna for getting it down to 2.84. It would have been nice to see 2.64, but that wasn't to be. So that's me.
Okay, thank you, Doug. I think we've covered everybody now. So if there's nothing further, would somebody like to move the recommendation that we have on page 21? It's a 2-part recommendation. I'll move that. Councillor McPhail, seconded by Councillor Reid. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? If there's not, I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Hands up. Against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you for both the questions and also the endorsement of the work that's been done to get us to this point. Okay, just to move on to the next item, which is the local government statement review, and we have a memo from the Chief Executive, another one of these formalities that does need to occur, and it's pretty well laid out there what it's all about, just putting it in very clear terms who and what we are, what our purposes in life is. Steve, do you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. This is a 3-yearly exercise that councils need to do, which is, it's really, it's a feature that came through in the 2002 Act when it was enacted to give the public the information they need on how their council operates and how they can participate in the democratic function of their local council. So this is just an updated document that we obviously following the election, you put in place the new elected members and take out those that are no longer on the council. Any changes in senior management, and really it's just an informative document. We're a little bit late this year. I guess floods and COVID-19 have conspired, but we're supposed to have it done by about mid-April, where we're in the midst of lockdown. But there's nothing particularly controversial, Worship. There is obviously a little reference on page 46 of the agenda, or 20 of the statement, to recognise that there has been some changes in the offing in respect of iwi liaison, yet to be clearly articulated, but it's a statement of where we're at the moment. But apart from that, Your Worship, it's pretty much business as usual, and is for your adoption, so it can be posted on our website as an information base for the public to access.
Thank you. And just a question, it was raised by Councillor McDonnell with me last night, just in terms of listing of our committees in there. I know some committees are listed or have been listed in full, but some, the three main ones that we have now, Audit and Risk, Capital Works and Community Strategy, only have the chairs. Is there a requirement to have all the council appointees in those committees included, or is it okay the way we can?
That's through Your Worship. That's really just a matter of personal choice. We can add the individual members of each committee into the document. There's no hassle whatsoever.
Okay. Right. I see we've got a couple of hands up. Councillor Grant, Doug, did you have a comment?
No, that was up from last time.
Right. Okay. Glenys? You're on mute, Glenys.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering if we have a statutory requirement to deal with both Te Marama and the Hokanui Runanga, or can we deal with one or the other? It's not very clear in this document as yet, but I see it's being looked at.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure that we really understand what the way forward will look like in terms of connecting with both those organisations. So hopefully we can make some good progress on it in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
Bronwyn?
Thanks, Your Worship. I notice on page 43, the council organisations, there's a line through the Community Counselling Centre, but there isn't an update of the name, and that's the Gore and Districts Community Counselling Centre. I think that might need to be included.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Is there any other alterations required of this document? There's not. So with those comments in mind, would somebody like to move that the local government statement be adopted and made available to the public? Councillor Reid, seconded Councillor Phillips. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. I'm sure there'll be a line up at the door in the morning wanting to get hold of this document. Right, on to item 5, which is rethinking rubbish, recycling, waste management, and indeed waste minimisation, which has been an interesting subject over the last little while, and one that will continue to attract lots of advice and comments, I'm sure, from a wide variety of people. But I think it's fair to say that it is an area that is incredibly challenging, not so much challenging in the way of management, but certainly in time, the opportunities for recycling have become very, very limited. In fact, non-existent in many cases, which I really am unhappy about. However, I don't know that there's too many options that council have right at the moment. And I would like to think that any decisions that we make tonight would be decisions that are probably more of a temporary situation than a than a long-term situation, and that when the recycling opportunities, both offshore and onshore, become much more viable, then this council would take a leading role in making sure that we're achieving recycling to the best of our ability. I know that there's been an awful lot of effort by this council over the past 4 or 5 years to educate and encourage people to recycle. And then I have to say that people have really taken that on board and want to do it, and asking them to cut back in that area now or change what they've been doing. It doesn't come easily to them or to me or to this council, I'm sure. But we do need to just have another discussion about what we're currently doing, what is the best way to move forward, and that's really what this is all about. So without too much further ado, can I ask Steve, do you want to just talk us through this particular situation we find ourselves in now, and talk to what's the recommendation or the options that you're asking council to consider tonight?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I mean, to endorse what you've said, the choices open to the council now in respect to recycling have been falling away at an alarming rate in recent months. And one thing the council has committed itself to is to be realistic and honest about what it can expect consumers to do, and that if we're saying put it in that bin, that we want to make sure that it will be recycled and it won't end up in a landfill. So in the last couple of months, the council has, as quick as it has been able, again, given the flood events and COVID-19 and the impending end of the current curbside or the recycling contract with SDE, is to figure out what is a way forward for the council in the interim. And the big thing here to emphasise is that there is a considerable amount of energy, I understand, being expended at national level to come up with a national strategy for recycling and waste minimisation, so that each council isn't forced to try and find the magic solution in its own area, because this is about scale and economics of having product, which one council trying to battle in its own right is always going to struggle to achieve. So we got to a point where the council was happy to have retain recycling to a degree, where glass would go in a yellow bin, cardboard would find its way to Pakeke lines via specifically provided receptacles in Ngora Matara, with the balance of waste to be deposited in the red bin. And significantly, and I think this is probably something that some members of the public have perhaps overlooked, green waste to be free of charge, and that now is in place as we speak, and was put in place during the COVID-19 alert levels 4, and then continued thereafter. So we're now in a situation where we've got a lot of waste potentially going into red bin, and not a lot of waste going to the yellow bin. At the time of the last council meeting where the proposal was approved, it's fair to say some councillors had reservations about whether we had the balance right between the 2 red bin collections per month and 2 yellow bin collections per month. And the thought at that time was to put in place the proposal as it was presented, particularly because it was retaining the cyclical nature of the current system, whereby the 2 red bins are emptied every other week, and likewise the yellow bins. However, it appears that once we started to communicate this proposal to residents in Ngora Matara, there was a fair bit of concern about the red bin's adequacy to take all the extra refuse, and only having a twice a month service. So we've looked at that and thought we've got enough time, if the council is of a mind, to see if we can offer some relief. But like a lot of things, there's never a perfect fit, and there's never a perfect solution, because there is always impacts. In this case, the impacts are twofold. One is cost. If you want to go to a weekly red bin service and still retain a yellow bin monthly service, that would be an extra cost of about $111,000. We believe if we have 3 collections per month and 1 yellow bin collection per month, so it's 3 red, 1 yellow, the cost increase would be negligible, about 15,000 potentially, depending on the extra waste that may go to the landfill. And I think this conversation, Your Worship, needs to emphasise that we have an obligation for waste minimisation. It's under the Waste Minimisation Act. But even if you are doubting Thomas in waste minimisation, the one thing that is very real is the waste minimisation levy. It's going upwards. It's moving from $20 to $60 per tonne over a period of 2 or 3 years. So coming soon to a place near us is a high tariff for just chucking things in a red bin and forgetting about it. So it behoves us both in terms of statutory obligation, but also in trying to encourage cost minimisation amongst our ratepayers to see if we can minimise our waste. So for that reason, we believe that the most responsible overall approach is to opt for option 2 in the report, which is a 3 red bin collection service, 1 yellow per month. Yes, it will provide some discomfort to consumers who have to wrestle with 1 fortnight where there is no service to the red bin. But the thought being is that maybe some residents can put aside some of those plastics and tins that they perhaps wash currently, and if they're not dirty or smelly, they can be put to one side and then spread over a 2-week service of the red bin. But I recognise it's not perfect, but it's probably the best solution we can come up with, and it mirrors a suggestion put forward by one of the councillors when we last met and discussed this matter a month or so ago.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We've got 3 hands up. Cliff, you want to begin?
Yes, while reading the agenda item, it became clear to me, or I felt it was clear, that we possibly haven't articulated to the public why we've made these changes. Now, Councillor Davis and myself are representatives on WasteNet that manage recycling and waste disposal regionally, and we're aware that there's been massive changes as far as the recycling or markets for recycling. They've just evaporated. And the regional present provider will no longer be our provider come the 30th of June. So we're in a situation where we have to make significant changes. The initial project proposal by council to have, a 2 weekly collection of red bins, I think as a result is provoked quite a lot of comment. So I think the second option of collecting on a month 3 red bin collections and 1 yellow bin is a very good compromise, bearing in mind it's a substantial reduction in costs to ratepayers. And of course, we've got to be very conscious that a lot of those that product that would have found its way into red bin was green waste, and that is now being provided as a free service, so at no cost. So look, I think the option 2 proposal is an excellent one, and perhaps we've been a little bit remiss in not explaining to the public why we've taken the step. There's been massive changes to waste management and the opportunity to do recycling in Southland. And so I think this is an excellent response and fully supportive of option 2.
Thank you, Cliff. Doug?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, this, as Steve alluded to, we went down this road a month ago. The actual idea originally came from Councillor Highstead through to Ramesh about doing a 3 bin, 1 yellow bin about 3 or 4 months ago. But and it's just it seems like social media has brought it to the attention where we were sort of elected to do the job. But you know, that's the way we went last time we discussed this. I got a query, Steve, on coming in from the Mrs. Gherkin regarding the media. In one of her statements on page 56, the 4th paragraph up, it's a 240 litre bin for glass only is a waste. People wanted to know if they could change to an 80 litre bin. And then it is currently council policy for people to only be allowed 2 bins the same size.
So can I just jump in there? The statements that you're talking there are not statements from the statements that Mrs. Gherkin just put coming from those.
So the brackets, is that coming from us or coming from the person?
Do you want to explain that, Sonia?
So there is I took a couple of statements that were posted on our Facebook feed as indicative of what people were saying, but it is correct that currently the policy is that people must have, their suite of 2 bins has to be the same size. So you can't have, say, an 80 litre bin and a 240 litre bin.
So that was my question. So my question is, what's the difference between policy and bylaw? Because it's not in the bylaw. The bylaw that we've just passed, there is no mention whatsoever of stating that they have to have 2 bins the same size. So where do we cross over there? How did that come about?
The difference between this particular policy relating to recycling as opposed to the solid waste bylaw. Does somebody want to talk to that? Steve, do you want to make a?
Yes, through your worship, a policy is something that the councils can change as it sees fit. And generally speaking, policies are a bit more detailed. Bear in mind, the bylaw often is geared towards minimising nuisance. So if it's not in the bylaw, it means the council can, if it chooses, change its policy. It just needs to be aware of the impact of doing that change. And so some of our staff may have some views about what that impact might be. I'm personally not aware of the rationale as to why we don't allow differing sizes, but there may be someone on staff that could elucidate on that particular matter.
That's my exact question, Your Worship. Why don't they allow a different size bin? Because if you've got one person that is not an alcoholic or doesn't drink at all, they're not going to use a 240 litre bin. They'll be using a small bin, but they may need a large 240 litre bin for their red rubbish. So we need to sort of have a look at that, do we, before this all goes through? Or?
It's a very good point you raised, and it's one that I've raised. I wasn't aware that we were in this situation, but I can see Nikki waving her hand frantically. Have you got a comment you want to make to that, Nikki?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. If we change all the yellow bins around the town to smaller bins, there's a significant cost to council. So we would have to find storage for all of those larger bins, and we would have to buy a swathe of smaller bins, all of which would be a significant cost. Bear in mind, when we did buy the bins initially, when everyone went into the recycling, we were able to claim some of that back through the regional levy. So some of the cost of that was offset by the regional levy for waste management. So that's the rationale. If we go and change the bins now, there'll be a significant cost. Thank you.
At the time we put this in place, there was also a simplicity of operation. Because, roughly the volumes that required for each bin would be similar. What we're talking about now is probably a change to that volume for the yellow bin. So look, it's a good point, and it would be interesting to just see what the cost implication might be, and also the storage space implication for the other bins. But we have some other hands up. Eunice and then Neville.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I think this what brings to fore is bigger issue about the amount of waste that manufacturers are costing ratepayers. And it's probably more of a central government issue, and it needs to be addressed. And because the costs need to be placed, I think, on the manufacturers that are creating the waste.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Absolutely. The cost of dealing with waste should be addressed at point of sale and dealt with there. There's been various attempts for that to happen. We had a packaging accord put in place about 10 years ago, which was going to solve all of our problems. Reality says that it didn't. But I do know that there is quite a lot of effort going on from a central government perspective to get to grips with a long-term solution for recycling. I don't know what that's going to be, but ultimately, waste minimisation is the answer, rather than just getting bigger bins or more bins and dealing with it. Okay, Neville.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just that we've been working with the staff in regards to Mataura, and we're working quite well, coming along nicely. The question, though, is that a lot of people, I don't believe, realise exactly how much it costs to recycle rubbish, and that discussion was brought up last night. So, Peter, would you like to just explain to the rest of the councillors basically how much it costs per tonne to recycle rubbish? Can I ask that through that, Your Worship?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
For Your Worship, just to give you an idea, for it's $182,000 a year to actually do the 2 recycling pickups per month. So it's about $127,000 per tonne. We pick traditionally for the year, we actually pick up about 800 tonne of recyclables. So yeah, so you divide that into 182 and we get $227 just for the pickup. It costs about $31 a tonne to transport it from Gore to AB Lime, and it costs us $120 a tonne at AB Lime to actually drop that off. So I'm getting mixed up here. AB Lime to take it to Southland Disabilities is $31 a tonne. To actually have it processed at Southland Disabilities is $308 a tonne. So all up is $566 a tonne from the curbside to recycle finished.
Yeah, it's expensive. No doubt.
And herein lies my question is that we have to formally educate our district in the way that we should, and that is to minimise your waste by not buying plastics, etc., the things that you can't recycle, or this is what's going to happen. It's going to go into the landfill, and the cost of recycling is expensive, and we just have to put it into the landfill.
Yep, and that's the situation we're finding ourselves in right as we speak. Ramesh, you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Worship. I think to add to the comment of Councillor Phillips and Peter, I would like to add some logistical point of view. Basically, the idea of the initial proposal or report to the Community and Strategy Committee was to do the 2 cycle and not to change the existing cycle of red bin was based on the theory that currently we have about 800 tons of the recyclable material. So majority of that recyclable material is glass and cardboard. If we are trying to isolate it, the plastic and the cans and metal contribute to roughly 10 to 15% of the rubbish. What the whole economics of this solution is to request the community to adjust that 10 to 15% within existing red bin cycles. So that way we can save some money. But then we have done further investigation or critique our own computation of the cost of the service. That we realized that the providing 3 red bin cycles, as I mentioned before, we wanted to observe the behavior and our education pattern to the community to make sure we told. So that was a fallback option to go for a 3 cycle.
3 red bin collection and 1 yellow bin collection of the glasses. We know the fact that the glasses will not be full with the existing capacity of the 240-liter bin, but that option is kept open because nationally government is still working on the solution of recycling. We don't know what evolves. It's a fast, rapid change is happening in this area. Ministry of Environment, there is a lot of surveys and discussions and meetings are going on. How do we improve nationally and develop some consistency? But there is nobody has come to a conclusion yet. This is the interim solution so that we can work and operate within the fiscal envelope. Knowing our community being very small, it is a blessing. We can do any changes and implement it, provided community supports us. We can continue to offer any services community wants at a cost. Because when we were discussing about the budget, the whole council and community is very much putting a strong eyes on the budgets and the cost of the rate increase. I think they should be respectful of that, what strategies we are coming out with, finding a cost-effective solution within the fiscal envelope so that we can fund other activities within the district. So,
thank you, Ramesh. I hear what you're saying, that the cheapest option is not always the best or the long-term option. And I know that what we're talking about now, if we shift to a 3 empty of the red bins in a month, can only ever be a temporary solution. And indeed, what we're doing now, what we have proposed previously is a temporary solution. But I guess it's striking that happy medium that you have been able to convince the community that we're doing the best we can, and that we've got a solution for the short term, and with hopefully with not too much time elapsing, we'll get to a point where we can get to a option into the near future. So, look, is there any other comments? Anybody? Oh, Bronwyn, do you want to make a comment? Everybody, you've still got your hand up, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to say that I can understand the fact that people are a bit stressed about the fact their red bins will be overflowing, and I don't think we have an option but to do option 2, if you'll pardon the pun. But the other thing is too, and I mentioned it last time, was we really need to be educating the people around town to just minimise their own waste. And I just wonder if perhaps, you know, our publicity officer, Sonia, could actually do some work there once things have settled a little bit. Just, I mean, a lot of people don't, you know, they'll recycle their cardboard, their small packaging and things. Well, that's not going to be an option now. So maybe we need to be thinking about, you know, what do we do? Do we, those that have fires, do they burn it to take up less room in the red bin, or what? And the fact that a lot of the rubbish that was recycled, I don't think people in the community understand that not all of it was recyclable anyway because of dirty containers and things like that. But the other thing is too, I think if people are going to, they want to recycle, but they have to be aware that only public pressure will push it at a higher level. And I'm not talking about Gore, I'm talking, you know, further up the food chain. So, and you have to be talking to supermarkets and just saying, get rid of your plastics, get rid of the packaging that's unnecessary. And I do notice, just as an aside, that I like the Harroway's porridge, and I know Councillor Gardner will be delighted to hear that. But I noticed that this last year they've gone from quite a large package to a smaller box, probably a third of the size in cardboard. And I think that's maybe the way that some of these companies may need to be thinking about their packaging. And that will only come when consumers drive those issues to other companies. But a little bit of publicity about what we could do may help.
Thank you.
It. And I do support recommendation 2.
I agree with you in terms of the Harrowage rolled oats option. They do a fantastic job, and it's a good way to start the day. I'd have to take point of difference with you in terms of getting further up the food chain than Gore. I don't think you can get any further up the food chain than Gore, but that's just a view that I have. So look, I think Unless there are any other comments, particularly anybody wants to make. I see Cliff, you've just put your hand up. Is there something else that?
I'm prepared to move the recommendation, Your Worship. Bearing in mind option 2 is fiscally, it's a slight improvement in the cycle without the great cost, and it's a response and an interim solution. So happy to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Do I have a seconder for that?
Your Worship, I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a number of people want to. So moved Councillor Bolger, seconded Councillor that we make a change to go to option 2, and we communicate that as effectively as we possibly can in the very near future with the wider community. Okay. Now I see we've lost our communications person.
I'm here, Your Worship. I'm actually back at my desk.
Oh, okay. Sneaking around the corner there. See? Okay. Did you want to make a comment, Sonia?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say that in response. Thank you, Your Worship. Just in response to Councillor Reid, we are working on quite an extensive communication plan, which includes letter drops to all the customers. There's quite a lot of waste minimisation education, which is a third and fourth wave. So yeah, watch this space. There will be quite a bit of publicity coming out about it.
Thanks, Sonia.
No. Great. Okay, so if there's no further comment or question, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? The motion is carried that we go with option 2 as a way forward. Well, thank you, councillors. Thank you for that discussion and the input. That was pretty universal, I have to say. I think that's the last item we have in committee. So would somebody like to move that we go back into open agenda, please?